So I was thinking this weekend that really in life, a lot of the problems we face and the challenges that we come up isn't really the big adversities that give us problem in both life and our business. It's really the culmination of lots of little annoyances that really get to us. And if you think about it, when in your relationships with boyfriend, girlfriend, spouse, whatever it may be, it's usually not something big that gets at you. It's the culmination of lots of little things that just build up and they build up and they build up, and that's kind of one of those straw that broke the camel's back type things. And it's the same thing when it comes to business. It's typically, once you get past the startup phase where you're trying to figure out your business, what ends up dragging businesses down and frustrating the heck out of everyone is the culmination of lots of those little nagging things that just build up and they just wear you down, and you don't really see them coming. It's just little things that just weigh you down, weigh you down, weigh you down, and then before long you're burnt out. And it reminded me of a story I heard once about there was a lake that got infested with this crazy type of lily pad that they kind of doubled day over day. And it was, if you think about it from a perspective like a 1 acre lake, which 1 acre is just about the size of a football field. I think it's 43,350 square feet is an acre. And what's wild when you think about that perspective is if you talk about 100% coverage of all of that, and you go down and you as in that perspective of it doubled every day, it really doesn't take very long for it to get all the way down to what would equate to 1 square foot. It's 16 steps that get you from essentially on a football field the size of a less than a football to the entire field being covered, in this instance being a lake. 16 steps. And what's crazy about this is it doesn't even really get noticed until the last 3 days. So for days 1 through 13, it doesn't seem like anything's wrong, it doesn't seem like anything's happening, but then all of a sudden, day 14, 25% of the lake was covered. On day 15, 50% of the lake was covered, and by day 16, the entire lake was covered, and it killed all the fish because there was no oxygen being able to get in. What's crazy about that is it literally, not until day 15, day 16, did this get noticed. And it's the same thing that happens, with our businesses. If you think about it from a perspective of, if we've got the kind of the bucket here that we've got. We're consistently trying to put, things into the bucket, revenue, customers, all those things. But inevitably what ends up happening is that we develop, in this instance, little leaks in the bucket. And so then all of a sudden we've got a little bit coming out here, a little bit coming out there, but it's not enough that it's going to sound the alarms. But then all of a sudden, these little leaks start becoming a big puddle. And these things kind of fly under the radar because we don't notice them. It's in the same instance of the lily pad story over here, is that it's not until it becomes a major problem that it gets a whole lot of exposure. And at that point, it's almost too late. And so what we have to do as business owners and in our personal lives is find ways to recognize when small leaks are more than just little things, and recognize that they're patterns of something bigger. And so with our business, we've seen this over the last couple months, from a cash flow perspective, because, we've had our top line has gone up over 20%, but our bottom line is flat. So we've gone like this from a revenue perspective, but pretty much the same from a profitability standpoint. So that is a sign that there's more coming in the top, but there's the same amount staying in the bucket. That means that we've got some leaks somewhere. And that's where, we've noticed on our side a few things. There's a culmination of lots of little things. One, we were staffed for a 40% growth, and we actually had a 20% growth. So we wanted to bracket for 20 to 40, and we were staffed for 40. So we took care of that by downsize or right sizing to where we needed to be. We also found out that we were doing more work than we were invoicing. We had jobs that we were doing and not invoicing, or they were not getting invoices for things, and it's just, we'd take the hard part selling it, then we'd do it, but we weren't getting invoices to them, or we weren't getting them on time. We also found that our timelines were getting kind of jacked up with some of our customers, and so payments that we were supposed to get each month were getting stretched out an extra 6-8 weeks, and then all of a sudden when we're anticipating a monthly check and it becomes a bi-monthly check, that affects cash flow. The other part was with hosting and just specifically expiring credit cards. We had reports coming saying that credit cards were expiring, which means we weren't getting those dollars in. So we were selling it, we were charging it, and each month that credit card was sending back a report saying, hey, this card isn't working. But we didn't have a system to catch that. So it kind of fell through the hole and it kind of leaked out. And so the combination of all of these little things ends up the result of that. And where you can figure that this is happening is when you have a decently sized, a big problem, or what is perceived like a bigger challenge, but no obvious answer, no obvious cause. In our instance, we see this as our potentially big problem that's going to happen down the road. Like if we don't, this is how you grow yourself into bankruptcy. So we saw that we had a problem, but there was not one big, okay, here's why we have this problem, which means there's lots of little things. And these were some of, if there's probably more, but these were some of the ones that we identified and that we're working on. And so it's one thing to recognize the problem, because any problem that you have, once you figure out the problem and you properly phrase the question, then the solution becomes much more manageable. The challenge to solving any problem is properly framing it and figuring out what it is. So if you don't know what the proper solution is, it's really hard to come up with what those actions should be. And so then what should you do? And this is where Idea Vortex can really be helpful, because Idea Vortex, if you remember, we talked about, when you're vetting a new idea, but this also comes in really handy when you're trying to anything experimental. And so we talked about, your idea, for the solution. If you try to go from 0 to 60, more often than not, it won't work. And entrepreneurs have a tendency to try to push through and dominate any problem, as opposed to trying to step back and make sure that they're addressing the right issue. And so that's where, Idea Vortex, when we talked about, observe, engage, reflect, share, test, rinse and repeat. And so if you remember, that kind of went like this. And so in this instance, if you're observing, this is when you're really taking a second to step back and figure out what's causing, what could potentially cause the challenges that you're facing. And so this is when it's really important to be looking at these situations and open up your mental filter, like we talked about last week, and look for those pattern recognitions and be looking for the little things that might be more than what they are. This is where it's really important for entrepreneurs to engage their team. This is where open communication, we do this really well, of talking to them, because it's impossible for an entrepreneur to know what's going on at every facet of their business. So that's why it's important to engage the rest of your team and say, here's the challenge, here's the problem that I'm seeing, any ideas? And the same thing from an entrepreneur to their team, the same thing within a department. If you're having a departmental problem, as a team lead, it's important not to try to take this on your own shoulders, but to talk to the rest of your team and say, hey, here's the challenge we're facing, what do you guys think? Take a time to reflect. This is where the 5 whys come in that we talked about, that, trying to get from the high level kind of symptomatic problem and get to the root cause. And so really take the time to get through there and dig into what could be causing these situations and these challenges that you're facing, and then share them. Share them back with your team. Share them with the people that you talk to up here, that you engage. Also, this is a great opportunity to share with peers. So, Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, this is where a lot of times when we're having frustrating problems, Brandon and I will often share it with other EO companies and other entrepreneurs. And in the instance of, departmentally, this is where it's important for you guys to be out networking and meeting other people from other companies, because there's a lot of experience share that can happen across businesses. Then go out and test things, and so this is where you want to create systematic solutions, and that means you need to test what you're doing. Don't just try to implement some solution. Don't just try to plug the hole with the finger. Don't try to be the Dutch boy. Try to figure out solutions that are going to systematically solve the problem that you face. So for our expiring credit cards, we didn't just go out and get all the credit cards and update them. We're creating a solution with the managed billing and managed hosting that will automatically send emails to customers, allow them to update it. We're creating a solution that's going to address that. On timelines, we didn't just send out a bunch of emails to try to get projects that are stretching out back on track. Now we're really going to be focusing on scheduling every meeting with the client out in advance, so to make sure that we have those benchmarks that we can stay on track. So these are the important things to make sure that you create systematic solutions and don't just try to plug the holes, because what ends up happening if you plug a hole, the second that a little more water comes in the top, it's going to blow that plug out, and then all of a sudden you got a leak all over again. And so it's important to create those systematic solutions, both in your business and in your personal life. It's not good enough just to buy flowers and apologize. You got to fix the problem, and that's where it comes in play. We're both from a personal and professional nature.